I need you to sign these. I'm marrying Tiffany. The wedding's already being planned. Paige Miller was at the dining table reviewing a lease summary when Dom walked in. He didn't greet her. He set his jacket over the back of a chair, adjusted his cufflinks, and slid a manila envelope across the polished surface toward her like it was a menu she'd already read. I need you to sign these, he said. She looked at the envelope. Then at him. What are they? Divorce papers. He said it the way someone announces a flight delay. Inconvenient. Already decided. Not worth softening. Paige didn't reach for the envelope. She studied his face, the jaw she knew, the eyes she'd trusted for 6 years. There was no conflict in them. No apology forming. Just the particular impatience of a man who considered the conversation half-finished before it began. You're serious, she said. It wasn't quite a question. I've been serious for a while. He pulled the papers free and laid them flat on the table between them. A pen followed. You just weren't paying attention. Then he said it. I'm marrying Tiffany. We've already started planning the wedding. Tiffany. Tiffany Amber. Paige's best friend since their sophomore year. The woman who had sat in this very chair 4 nights ago, squeezing Paige's hand across this very table, saying I don't know how you deal with him working those hours. You're so patient. You're so strong. Paige's hands did not shake. Her voice did not crack. She looked at the papers for a long moment, then looked back at him. Does she know you're here right now? Dom shrugged, the way men shrug when they've already rehearsed their indifference. She's the one who said to get it done tonight. Clean break. He glanced at his watch. Paige picked up the pen. She didn't ask questions. She didn't read through the clauses or call an attorney or demand to know what she was giving up. She simply signed, every line, every page, her handwriting steady and unhurried, like a woman finishing a task she'd long since made peace with. Dom collected the papers, slid them back into the envelope, and straightened his jacket. At the doorway, he paused. For what it's worth, he said, with a generous tone of a man bestowing a parting gift, you'll land on your feet. You've always been solid. Just not quite what this next chapter needs. Too ordinary. He didn't say those exact words yet, but they were already in the room. Then he left. The door closed behind him with a quiet, final click. Paige sat at the table alone. She looked at the place where the envelope had been, the faint rectangle it had pressed into the linen, already fading. She did not cry. She did not move for a long moment. And then very slowly the corner of her mouth shifted, not into a smile exactly, but into the expression of a woman who knows something no one else in the room does. What Dom didn't know, what Tiffany didn't know, what no one in their world had thought to ask, was that solid wasn't the only thing Paige was. And ordinary was about to become the most expensive word Dominic Vane had ever spoken. Sit back. This is a story about betrayal, patience, and the kind of power that doesn't announce itself until it's time. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Paige packed one suitcase. Not because it was all she had. Because it was all she decided to take. She moved through the bedroom with the quiet efficiency of a woman who had already done her grieving somewhere private, somewhere Dom would never find it. One suitcase. Clothes, documents, the small leather journal she'd kept since her 20s. She left the jewelry he'd bought her, not out of bitterness, but because none of it had ever really felt like hers. She left the throw blankets and the framed photos and the expensive espresso machine he'd picked out and she'd learned to use. She zipped the bag, carried it to the door, and called a car. The apartment she moved into was on the 14th floor of an ordinary building on the quieter side of the city. Clean lines, modest square footage, a window that faced east. She made coffee the first morning in a second-hand kettle she bought from a shop 2 blocks down, and she stood at that window and watched the city wake up, and she felt, unexpectedly, almost strangely, like herself. Dom heard about the apartment through Tiffany, who heard it through a mutual friend, and he did what men like him always do with information they can't fully process. He reframed it. She's handling it better than I expected, he told Tiffany. That's just how Paige is. Steady. A little resigned. Tiffany nodded. She believed him, because it was easier than asking harder questions. Neither of them considered a third possibility, that Paige's composure wasn't resignation at all. That it was the particular calm of a woman with somewhere very specific to be. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. Paige was at her east-facing window with her second-hand kettle when the courier knocked. Not a standard mail carrier, but a private courier in a dark jacket who asked for her by full name and waited while she signed for it. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, sealed with the kind of formality that doesn't come from ordinary correspondence. The return address read, Hargrove and Associates, Estate Law and Private Holdings. She didn't open it immediately. She set it on the counter and finished her coffee first, because she had learned, somewhere in the long quiet years of her marriage, that the best response to the unexpected is a steady pulse. When she finally opened it, she read it twice. Alexander Miller. Estate of her grandfather. The man she had met exactly 3 times in her life, the last time being at her mother's funeral 11 years ago, when he had stood apart from the other mourners in a dark coat and said very little. He had watched her, she remembered. Carefully. The way someone watches a thing they are still deciding about. He had died 6 weeks ago. She hadn't known. No one had called. But Hargrove and Associates was calling now. She was summoned to their offices on Thursday at 10 in the morning. The letter used words like soul and designated an estate valuation without elaborating further, which told her the elaboration was being saved for the room. She pressed the letter flat, slid it back into the envelope, and went to her closet. She chose ivory. Not for anyone else. For herself. Because some mornings, you dress for the version of your life that's about to begin. The offices of Hargrove and Associates occupied the 42nd floor of a building Paige would later learn her grandfather had owned outright since 1987. She arrived at 10. She was shown in immediately. What she did not expect, what stopped her for precisely 1/2 second in the doorway, was Dom. And beside him Tiffany, in a dress that said she had dressed for an occasion she expected to win. They were already seated, already arranged, already wearing the careful expressions of people who believe they are about to be handed something. Dom's attorney had apparently made contact with Hargrove and Associates 2 days prior. Something about community property. Something about marital contributions to Paige's family relationships. The kind of legal creativity that requires a very high opinion of oneself. Paige sat down across from them, set her document folder on the table, and folded her hands. The senior partner, a measured man named Ellison, did not make them wait long. He read the designation clearly without theater. Sole heir, Alexander Miller Estate, Global Real Estate Holdings, approximate valuation, $650 billion. The number landed in the room like something physical. Dom's breath left him audibly. Tiffany's hand found his arm and gripped it, not from affection but from the sudden need to hold onto something solid. 2 members of building security, stationed near the door, stepped forward when Dom rose from his chair. He sat back down. Paige signed the documents. Every page. The same steady handwriting she had used 3 days ago on entirely different papers. Then she closed the folder, stood, and walked to the door. It opened for her. She did not look back. The journals came in a box. 12 of them cloth-bound, dating back 30 years, delivered to Paige's modest apartment by a Hargrove associate who carried them like they were something irreplaceable, because they were. Paige cleared her small kitchen table, made tea she didn't drink, and began to read. Alexander Miller had not been a warm man. The journals confirmed what 3 brief meetings had already suggested. He was precise, unsentimental, fluent in the language of assets and leverage and long-term positioning. He wrote about people the way he wrote about properties, in terms of what they were built on, and whether that foundation would hold. He had started watching Paige 7 years ago. She hadn't known. Of course she hadn't known. He'd engaged a quiet, thorough firm to observe, not to surveil, he was careful to note, but to understand. He wanted to know what she was made of, this granddaughter who had married a man with loud ambitions and a hollowing effect on everyone around him. What he documented over those 7 years was not drama. It was the absence of it. The way Paige absorbed diminishment without dissolving. The way she kept her word, kept her composure, kept herself, some essential uncompromised version of herself, even as Dom's version of her grew smaller and smaller. She does not beg, Alexander had written, in the final journal, dated 4 months before his death. She does not perform. She simply endures with a dignity most people abandon by 40. That is rarer than money. That is what money should belong to. Paige closed the journal carefully. She sat with that for a long time. Then she got to work. Dom moved fast, the way men do when they're performing confidence they haven't yet earned. Within 2 weeks of the inheritance announcement, which had been covered briefly in 2 financial trade publications before Paige's team quietly declined further press, Dom and Tiffany had rebranded. Their joint Instagram account launched on a Wednesday morning with a professionally shot image, the two of them on the terrace of a glass penthouse, city sprawling beneath them, Tiffany's hand resting on Dom's chest, both of them wearing the expression of people who believe the camera is the scoreboard. Building something real. Together. The caption read. The comments filled quickly. People who had watched the divorce news with raised eyebrows now softened. Dom gave a podcast interview about vision and legacy and knowing when a season of your life has run its course. Tiffany posted about alignment. About choosing yourself. About the courage it takes to build an empire with someone who truly sees you. Paige saw the posts the way most people see weather, noted, processed, moved past. But then she looked closer. The penthouse terrace in the launch photo. She recognized the railing detail, a custom brushed bronze design, distinctive, commissioned in 2019. She pulled up the portfolio document her estate team had prepared and found it in under a minute. Tower 9, Level 48. Miller Holdings. Available for short-term luxury rental. The venue behind their partnership announcement post. Also hers. The boutique hotel lobby visible in the background of Tiffany's brand video. Also hers. Paige set her phone down on her desk, her real desk, in her real office, on a floor she actually owned. She said nothing. She didn't need to. Not yet. The full portfolio arrived on a Monday in a document set that required its own dedicated binder, tabbed, indexed, cross-referenced by region, asset class, and current tenancy. Paige read it the way her grandfather would have. Carefully. Without rushing toward conclusions. It took her the better part of 2 days. On the morning of the 3rd day, her lead estate attorney, a precise woman named Claire Sutton, sat across from her in the new headquarters and walked her through the commercial tenancy overview, current lessees, lease terms, renewal windows, any accounts showing irregular payment history. Dom's firm appeared on page 7. Vane Capital Group held the primary office lease on floors 19 through 21 of a Miller Holdings commercial tower in the financial district. 12,000 square feet. The lease had been negotiated 3 years ago, before anyone knew Paige existed in this context, before anyone had reason to make the connection. The rent had been paid reliably. Until the last 2 quarters, where the ledger showed a pattern Claire described, with characteristic understatement, as inconsistent. Tiffany's lifestyle studio occupied a Miller-owned creative space in the design district. Month-to-month tenancy. No long-term agreement. And the boutique hotel, the one featured in Tiffany's venue announcement post, the one with the terrace strung with warm lights and the privately catered reception hall booked for the wedding, was a Miller property managed through a hospitality subsidiary. Paige had only just been briefed on. Paige turned each page without comment. Claire watched her with the quiet attention of someone who had learned not to fill silences that were doing important work. When Paige finished, she closed the binder. "Thank you, Claire," she said. "I'll let you know." The first crack appeared quietly, the way they always do. A lender Dom had been courting for a flagship deal, a mixed-use development he'd been positioning as the centerpiece of Vane Capital's next chapter, sent a 2-line email requesting a revised asset summary before proceeding. Polite language. Standard language. The kind that means someone has been making calls. Dom told Tiffany it was routine. She believed him, because the wedding was 3 weeks out and belief was easier than the alternative. But then a second lender requested the same. And a third quietly declined a meeting that had been on the calendar for 6 weeks, citing an internal review with no further detail. Dom's phone calls started taking longer to return. The particular rhythm of a man being managed at a distance, not confronted, just slowed, began to assert itself in his days. Tiffany's studio received a formal letter on a Thursday. Hargrove and Associates, on behalf of Miller Holdings, notifying the current tenant of an upcoming lease review, effective at the next billing cycle. Standard procedure under new ownership, the letter explained. A representative would be in touch to discuss terms. Tiffany called her business attorney, who told her it was probably nothing. Boilerplate. New ownership always triggered these reviews. She posted a brunch photo that afternoon. Captioned it unbothered. Neither of them said Paige's name. The thought arrived at the edges of Dom's mind once briefly, in the car on the way home from a meeting that had gone worse than expected, and he dismissed it before it fully formed. Paige was solid. Paige was steady. Paige was ordinary. He had said so himself. The wedding was scheduled for 2 o'clock. By 8 in the morning, the documents were already in motion. Claire Sutton's team had prepared everything the week prior: lease terminations, loan recall notices, formal revocation of venue access, all drafted with the clean, unhurried language of people who understand that power doesn't need to raise its voice. They were delivered simultaneously, by courier, at 8 a.m. sharp. The kind of coordination that looks effortless because it was meticulously planned. The boutique hotel received its notice first. Miller Holdings, under new ownership review, hereby revokes event access to the reserved reception hall effective immediately pending property assessment. The events manager called the wedding coordinator. The wedding coordinator called Tiffany's phone, which went to voicemail because Tiffany was in a bridal suite chair having her hair pinned. Dom's office lease termination arrived at the building management desk at 8:14. By 9, his firm's most senior partner was calling him. By 9:30, 2 lenders who had been quietly watching Vane Capital's asset situation had seen enough. The loan recall notices confirmed what the last several weeks had suggested. The calls started coming faster than he could silence them. Tiffany's studio notification was hand-delivered at 9:45. By noon, Dom was standing in the hotel lobby in his wedding suit, phone pressed to his ear, his face carrying the particular expression of a man watching a structure collapse that he built entirely on assumptions. The flowers were still arranged. The chairs were still set. The cake had been delivered. None of it could be used. The fairy tale didn't end with a fight or a revelation. It ended with unanswered phones and a lobby that suddenly belonged to someone else. He called at 12:47 p.m. Paige was at her desk on the 38th floor of a Miller Holdings tower, reviewing a development proposal for a commercial portfolio in 3 cities. Her assistant noted the incoming call, glanced at her once, and said nothing. Paige looked at the name on the screen for a moment, the same name she had once woken up next to, once built a life around, once signed away on a polished dining table without argument. She answered. Paige. His voice was stripped of everything, the confidence, the impatience, the particular boredom he'd used like a weapon. What was left was just a man standing in a lobby that no longer had any use for him. Paige, whatever this is, I think we should talk. I think there's been. Dom. Her voice was calm. Not cold. Simply settled, the way a woman sounds when she has nothing left to prove. You told me I was too ordinary for the life you were building. She paused once, briefly. I just wanted you to understand what ordinary looks like from the outside. Then she ended the call. By evening, the story had broken across 3 financial news outlets simultaneously. By midnight it was everywhere: the quiet ex-wife, the $650 billion inheritance, the wedding that collapsed in real time. By morning, Paige Miller's name was on the cover of every publication that mattered, accompanied by a photo her team had approved, her at her desk, document folder open, expression unhurried. She had already moved on to the next proposal before the first headline published. She never looked back. She never needed to. And somewhere across the city, in a lobby full of flowers that belonged to her, Dom finally understood what he had dismissed. Not a nobody. Never a nobody. If you thought Paige's story ended here, it didn't. There's one detail buried in Alexander Miller's final journal entry that we didn't cover today. Something he wrote about Dom specifically. Something that changes everything you think you just watched. Hit subscribe, because that one's coming next. And drop a comment below. Did you see the ending coming, or did it catch you off guard? We read every single one. See you in the next one.